Good afternoon, guys. All right, trade reviews are going to make a comeback. I've been slacking last week. I kind of took it off because I was preparing for the master class, and then then I got burnt out after the master class. But now we're back. Going to try to be doing the trade reviews every single day, starting with today. Today was a horrible day to sit through. Today was real rough. Now I ended up green, as did many of you guys who traded with me. But it was a very rough time. But I'm just going to go over the analysis, what kind of went into each trade and the thought process there. And here was the pre-market setup. We had pretty bearish PPI this morning. Didn't really have any PTs to the downside, none to the upside. All I have is this bear pennant. And keep in mind, I'm not even super bearish for this bear pennant to break to the downside because this first leg is only like 8 minutes long. And this bear pennant's been going on for an hour. But pretty much before this, I'm like, all right, well, if we, it's a pretty decent trade to take if I take shorts when most of this bounce invalidates or puts to this low, or calls to this high. Now, more so, this is pretty heavy supply. Not really expecting this to break. It's a bunch of zones. This could be considered heavy supply. I mean, it has 3 supply zones overlapping, but they're all 30-minute and 45-minute zones, very weak. And we have a missed pivot up here as well. So we have very nice pivots up here. So I'm thinking, well, if NQ gets this supply, it's more likely to break it than not. So that's what I'm thinking. So that's the plan. If we drop, I'll go puts. If we run up a bunch, I will chase it and take calls in pursuit of the pivots above. Now, here was the first candle in market open. And I entered puts half size on this drop. Now, I entered a little bit earlier than this. Looking back, a little bit earlier than I should have, but didn't end up making a difference with the result of the trade. Essentially, I filled roughly up here. And I was looking for a break to the downside. Now, what really stuck out to me a lot was ES's weakness. ES was a lot weaker than NQ, and you can see that right now if you take your eyes over to NQ. NQ is going up. It broke this high. Now, I would have liked ES to sweep this high. It would have increased the odds of the trade. But to me, ES was a lot weaker than NQ, and I don't think it's unlikely at all that NQ pulls back to here. And even if NQ gets a here, that should give me my ESPT because it is that much weaker. But we do have a lot of fibs above, and I did go half size because, again, this bear pennant wasn't super likely to break to the downside. But if you take a look at the fibs on NQ, another big factor with me going half size is, well, NQ may want to get to the 61.8 fib. It is the only major level I have anywhere near where NQ is right now. And I think there's a pretty decent chance it gets there. But I'm also triggered in at the moment. So I entered half size and plans to average down if we get to the 61.8-ish, roughly. If we sweep this high on ES, this level here, this is where I like to average down. Or if we drop to here, I'm just going to average up. No matter what, I'll be one normal size position in this trade. Let me make sure I'm following along in my options channel so I don't get the pricing messed up. So I entered this trade initially at 3.0. Now, in advance today had a horrendous options chop. I averaged down on this candle. Looking back on it though, I should have waited for the next candle. I should have waited for this candle to average down. But I did end up averaging down. Now this candle didn't really explode up like this. It popped up, but it kind of just ran to the upside. If it just shot up within 5 or 10 seconds, then I would have stopped out. But this candle just kind of ran to the upside kind of slow. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll take the average down. Looking back on it, I did have an excuse to exit there, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I ended up averaging down pretty much right when it got to this pivot at 2.25. That brought my average to 2.6 for these SPX. And really, my stop loss was here. My PT was here. So roughly a 1.6 risk reward trade, nothing crazy. And ES kept being weak. Now, we were getting a lot of lower lows with buying wicks. And the way these candles are chopping on ES indicates a lot of struggle between bears and bulls. And I'm thinking it's a little bit more likely to short squeeze to the upside and stop me out. But it could stop loss rate to the downside. Now, NQ, I'm also kind of triggered into QQQ calls at this point. Obviously, I can't be in because I'm stuck in this trade. But we'll just kind of see what happens. And we dropped decent. We actually got pretty close to break even here. But then this candle happened and it kind of got ruined. And I believe it was, no, not this candle. This candle. When this candle's selling wick invalidates, I will be out of this trade. The second is selling. The second it invalidates. Boom. I sold halfway into this candle, all the way at 1.7 for like a 37% loss. I think it was like minus 30. It was like minus 35 to 37%. I don't know how much it was. So it was a good size loss. The contracts just chopped really hard. Not as hard as what the QQQ calls are about to do to me. Because I'm triggered into Q calls at this point. And I'm triggered in on this candle. So I stopped out of that trade and flipped to calls. I'm not a guy that likes reversing trades and, you know, entering a bunch of things. But, I mean, I'm very much so triggered in. It's well above the 61.8. It looks very nice. Now, I personally did enter... I remember... I said I was entering half size. I entered a little bit heavier than half size, and I ended up adding... This trade was a little bit complicated, you guys will see. So I entered roughly half size here, a little bit heavier than half size. And it just kind of started shooting up. Now, I added here, because I'm like, okay, well, it's not pulling back, I'll add it here. So by this point, I was almost a full-size position. My average didn't really go up much, though. It was still right around 62 cents. I think I added it like 65 or something. I don't know. But it wasn't that many contracts. For math purposes, my average is 62 cents. And it's going great. Great trade. Looks fantastic. 10 out of 10. That's pretty much 3 white soldiers. I'm up well over 30% on this trade. I've just hit break even on the day. And we still have room to go. Looks fantastic. And even after this, I'm going to be bullish for this ESPT. Because ES... has a perfect double top. So I'm very biased for this to hit. And just above this is another major pivot. So I'm really biased for both of them to hit. So we got room to run. And right when I say that in my channel, I type that out in my channel, boom, it gets smoked. And I thought it was news. I didn't see any news though. It looks like the supply was actually just that strong, which is rare. It's like once every couple of months or once a month maybe that I see that small of a time frame zone cause a rejection like that. I swore it was news, and I thought I was going to end up stopping out of the trade. But it put in this huge buying wick. I'm like, all right, if this buying wick's gone, I'm out. This is where the chop really started. The chop really started here. It got really bad. And you can also see during this bounce, oof, ES flipped a lot stronger than NQ. I was kind of regretting my decision on averaging up on this trade, but honestly, it doesn't really, it's not a big deal. It's kind of average, but at this point, I want to be in SPX calls. I don't like the NASDAQ. These contracts are starting to chop a lot. You can see how much stronger ES is than NQ. I want to be in SPX calls, but I can't because I'll be way over leveraged. So I put an order to sell half of my QQQ position roughly at break even. And somehow I filled, and I looked at the options chart, and it literally got to a high of 62. My average was a little bit higher than 62, though. I think it was like I said, 64 or something like that. So I did lose a little bit of money on my fill, just a tiny bit. But I wanted to be in SPX. So that happened here. And guess what? I filled SPX here. Now, I filled SPX lighter than half size, though, because I was super iffy. I mean, NQ's chopping to hell. Is ES really going to be able to cut through all of this supply? And I really thought I was likely to average down on this trade because to me, this looks like a great setup for it to get another oscillation. If we get another oscillation, that'll be a great place to add. So it's bullish enough to get me in, but not bullish enough to be full size, especially with the way contracts are chopping. I didn't see SPX contracts chopping as much, but I know with how much resistance we have up here, there is a decent chance we may be stuck in this range for some time. And if that's the case, these contracts are going to get slammed. So I entered ES between 1/3 and half size. I think it was closer to like 1/3 my normal size. And you can see, look how weak the NASDAQ is. And this is when the chop started hard. I was down 20% right here on my QQQ calls. And I was half a candle below where I entered. It was really, really, really bad. SPX was doing okay, though. No really place to add to SPX. Right, we have perfect double top right here. I'm bullish for that to break. You know, if we pull back to here, now I can add. But NQ barely missed this pivot, and this was kind of a factor for me. NQ barely missed this pivot here. By like a point, a couple of points, I guess. No, like 1 point and some change. And with how weak NQ was, I'm like, well, you know, ES is a perfect double top. It's got two of them, one straight above, one all the way up here. I'm bullish for it to go up, but NQ is so weak. I'm starting to think NQ is going to stop me out of this trade, and I still have to be in the SPX trade. And if SPX stops me out after this, it's just going to be a way bigger loss. But at this point, it's concerning because if I stop out of the NASDAQ, I'm going to be down like 50%. And I was right here. I was down like 40% on this trade. Way more than I should have. Wasn't even thinking about averaging down. I was willing to do it, but not anymore with this chop. The only way I add to this trade, because I was thinking this is what's going to happen. We're going to go down. We're going to sweep this pivot. I'm going to stop out, and then it's going to come back up, and then I'm going to have to re-enter. I am very bullish for these pivots to hit. Like very, very, very bullish for this supply to break, these pivots to hit, especially the perfect double top on ES, even though it's a lot further away, or it was. Very bullish for these pivots to hit. And I think that's what's likely to happen. And I'm staying kind of smaller size because that's what I think is going to happen. That didn't happen, though. It barely missed my stop loss, and we came back up. And I added right at the start of the next candle. Now, I was pretty heavy between both the trades. I was pretty much 2x size. This was 2 trades. It's pretty rare that I do that. This was the only set of trades I was going to take before I stop. I'm not willing to lose more than 3 in a day. So, you know, that'll... If I go more than 3 in a day, that can put me above my average daily win, and I don't really want that. It's bad for psychology as well. But I did add right when this selling wick invalidated for a couple of reasons. Well, now we have a confirmed, like this is... Looks like a fractal cup and handle. In reality, it's a bull pennant. Right, we're in an uptrend. We have unswept pivots above. ES is perfect double tops. The only thing going against this trade is supply, and the other reasons are way more bullish than the supply is bearish. So at the start of the next candle, right when the selling wick invalidated, I added to my trades. And guess what? You would think that it was an average up. No. I entered this trade at 62 cents here. Right here, these contracts hit 31 cents for minus 50% loss. It's very unfortunate that I stop out based on what the chart says, not what money says, right? If I enter a trade because of the chart, I exit because of the chart. If this is where my stop loss is, this is where it is. Well, right here, the contracts were at 45 cents. We are a decent amount above my initial entry, and I'm still down like 30%, almost 30, like 25%. SPX was the same thing. I filled for 45 cents on the NASDAQ. And what I fill? I filled, I didn't actually. My average only dropped to 3.3. I remember that specifically. It did chop a decent amount. Wasn't as terrible. I filled my average down. I think it was at 3.1. No, I think it was 3.2. My average was 3.3. So it was a tiny average down. I'll tell you guys and a lot of times when contracts are chopping this much and it ends up squeezing, the contracts will wait until the very end to finally squeeze and get some value back. But these contracts are extremely underpriced. I was very jealous of the people getting in. By the way, at this high, we got to 57 cents. Not even break even on my trade yet. It was so bad. Here, ES flipped super weak. That was pretty concerning because it was a hardcore, beautiful supply rejection. Here's another, like if I see this, I'm in there like underwear. This is beautiful. 10 out of 10 setup here on NQ. ES is super weak. I finally hit break even on this candle. And then this candle, the next candle, where all the gains came from because it caught up. So it ended up doing pretty good. The QQQ calls got to 78 cents all the way up here. Yeah, it wasn't here. It was right here. They got all the way to... Let me make sure I'm correct. Yep. On this next candle, they got all the way to 78 cents here. Keep in mind right here, they got to like 84. Really bad chop. And I only hit break even right here, so it shot up, 30% in gains in just this candle because I had to catch up because they were super undervalued. Now, I averaged down on the trade at 45 cents, which brought my average to 54. Thank the Lord. So I actually ended up doing roughly 37% gains at that specific PT. The SPX calls only got 45% gains at 4.8, but officially my day is finally green. Again, I'm going over it very fast. I don't really want to talk about it, but holding it was rough. The contracts were devastatingly choppy. And also, when I did add, I moved my stop loss to like here because I was unwilling to sell at like minus 80%. So sometimes money is a small factor. But I left runners in. I actually left a decent amount of runners in, not super tiny. But I left a decent amount of runners in because, that ES perfect double top was really likely to hit. I thought it was going to miss right here, but it didn't. And I sold the last on this candle. I actually sold it the candle before, but whatever. And those QQQ calls got 79% gains, 97 cents. And the SPX calls got 124% at 7.4. So on those two trades, which were both pretty much full-size trades, not half and half, which is lucky, or it's lucky I didn't lose because today could have easily been a pretty big red day. It is what it is, I'd say my psychology was perfect, so that's what matters. But anyways, yeah, plus 79% and then plus 124%, following up from my full-size loss of like minus 35-ish%. So it ended up being a great day. And I sent a TA alert here, and this is like the only trade I took on futures today live with you guys. I sent out TA alert. This pivot was still untested. So I sent out this futures alert, this TA alert. I just traded it on futures. Like, all right, if it gets down here, that's good enough. Boom. I took it on ES. Unfortunately, I wish I took it on NQ. I would have made a little bit more. But here was the TA alert that I sent out. Beautiful supply rejection. Got there flawlessly. It had 4-to-1 probability analysis odds, so it was a very likely trade to hit. And I already had those odds done by the time I sent the TA alert. And yeah, it ended up being a very good day. It went from a horrendously unbearable day to a very good day. So I ended up very happy with it. And pretty much everyone that traded with me made money. So it was a pretty good day. But all right, do you guys have any questions at all regarding any of the analysis that I just went over? It was only 3 trades, so there's not a lot of analysis. It's mostly, if you were with me today in live, it was pretty much just me bitching about how terrible my contracts were chopping and how green my trade is supposed to be, but it's still red. So that was pretty much the bulk of this morning. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't mean 4-to-1 risk to award, but that's crazy if that's 4-to-1 risk to award an attack. Okay, you took puts on that TA now? Nice, Dakota. Nice. It's okay. Maybe I'll come back again. Blue 3%. Epic, what happened, dude? Let's talk about it. What happened? What happened that made you blow 3% of your portfolio today? And good job, only 3% though. Most people blow 100% of it. I have blown 100% of my portfolio too many times to count over the years, especially in mostly in 2020 and 2021, but NQ is NASDAQ futures. QQQ is an ETF that tracks the NASDAQ. So yes, they move pretty much identically. I blew 10%, but keep in mind it's also relative too. 10% of a $5,000 portfolio, it's like that's not that big because it's each contract is half of that, right? So it depends. Whereas 10% of a, you know, 1.5 to 2.5 million dollar portfolio, that's a big issue if you lost that much. But all right, sweet. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap up the recording. Oh wait, never mind. Abraham says, I know it's not related to the analysis, but I'm new on this. I'd like to know if you are going to do another masterclass soon. So the max I do is once a month. That was the first masterclass that I've done since January, though. Yeah, I've never been good about doing them once a month, but I'm trying. But keep in mind, each masterclass, I only have like 8 of them, and I cycle through the topics. So the topic that I taught on Sunday, at the most, at the very soonest, I won't teach like a class again in for roughly 6 months. I would highly recommend you purchase the recording of it. The recording has all the content that I went over. It will end up being a very, very, very good class. I think it's one of my best ever. So it was a whole 2 hours and maybe 15 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes. Uh, but it's good. Lots of information with a PowerPoint presentation. So if you DM, make sure DMs are on, but DM me about that and I can give you all the information. All right, there you go. Dakota says amazing class. Yeah, guys, DM me. Just make sure if it says like you can't DM me, it's because your settings you have your DMs turned off for non-friends. Make sure your DMs are on and then DM me and I'll get you guys that information. I already DM'd you. Let me make sure I have it. Let me see. Yeah, okay, I see it. I'll get you the information later. I just marked down unread for now. But all right. That is pretty much it, guys. So you all have a blessed rest of your day. If I don't see you again, for your premium people, we have yet another TA class in a little under an hour. I'm so excited for our summer TA course to finish. But I will see all you guys soon for that TA class. But all right, I'll see you guys later.